In order to better shape the future, one must learn from the past. The history of first-person shooters, beginning in the 90s, is one that has yielded some of the most unique experiences ever created. This list is of the top 10 best levels in first-person shooter history. These are the levels I feel are most worth studying. These are the ones that we should pass on to future generations. These are the examples of some of the most innovative, intricate, and brilliant levels out there. They're the ones which showcase just what games can do. I chose many of these levels because of how well they represent a certain design philosophy. Of course, this list is entirely objective. I climbed Mount Sinai and got this list of the 10 best levels directly from God himself. To question it is heresy. There are some rules. Only one game per series. I'm also not including games I've never played. I feel like it would be dishonest to place a level in my own list that I haven't actually played, just because it's going to be popular. I also disqualified certain games which are first person and do have shooting, but aren't necessarily what one would class as a first person shooter. But don't worry, I'll get to that. So without further ado, the unquestionable list of the best FPS levels. At number 10, a slightly more obscure one, The Mines from Red Faction. Red Faction was developed by Volition, a nobody Z-list studio at the time that, despite being American, were really good at making Eurojank. Like, I legitimately expected them to be based in Czechoslovakia or something. It's also worth noting that these are the dudes who ended up making Saints Row. You probably haven't heard of Red Faction, and that's fine. Or maybe it isn't, because damn, this game is good. Although not everyone agrees. It was an awful PS2 port, which is at least somewhat responsible for its negative reception. It's also very inconsistent. Some levels are non-stop action, and then you'll hit the next level with awful forced stealth. The real appeal of this game is the destruction enabled by its geomod engine. The reason I love it so much is that it would likely be considered ambitious even in a modern game, let alone 2001. Red Faction kind of shows how little progress we've made today in terms of truly interactive environments. But it is a very flawed game. As it goes on, more of the levels are built out of indestructible materials, so this system doesn't even really matter. You can clearly see when they start to run out of dev time and money to actually utilize their feature in an interesting way. As such, the best level is probably the first, The Mines. It's the one that shows off the most destructibility. Red Faction is an often overlooked title which I believe is definitely worth playing. I just hope that the series makes a comeback someday. At number 9, Kadingia Sanctum from Doom 2016. And yes, this counts for Doom as a whole, including classic Doom. Chiming in on the Doom 2016 versus Eternal debate, I think Doom Eternal made some incredible innovations in terms of game design, but one place where I think Doom 2016 has the advantage is level design. I know New Doom in general is very fond of its invisible walls, can't have anyone exploring on their own, but Doom 2016's level architecture felt less contrived and more like actual infernal hell pits for tortured souls. Less floating platforms and spitting fire things from Mario. The introduction to hell actually feels hellish. It really helps that Kadingia Sanctum is some of the best and most open combat areas of the game. It really makes the player feel like they have a ton of freedom. It also helps that there's a good number of secrets on the level. It has among the most in the game. At number 8, The Big Bank from Payday 2. I count Payday 2 as more of a shooter than an RPG or puzzle game, although it does contain plenty of puzzle mechanics. I class Payday 2 more in the vein of cooperative shooters like Left 4 Dead in terms of game design. The Big Bank was probably the biggest and most exciting Payday heist in terms of scale. Robbing a giant bank is probably the first thing people think of when it comes to heists. Films often attempt to portray this robbery with epic scale. The casing, the hostages, the shootouts, the giant vault, the getaway. Payday is perhaps the most successful portrayal in video game form. The heist introduced pre-planning, meaning you had control over how you were going to execute it. There are a number of bombastic ways you could enter. You could use stealth, hack the computers and get in using keycards. You could drop a giant pig with parts for a giant drill inside. You could make a loud escape, crashing a bus through the wall like The Dark Knight, or a quiet escape through an elevator shaft. Not to mention that soundtrack. It's certainly not perfect though. The stealth is janky, it's buggy, the guards have awful AI, they can often see you through walls. There's horrible desync, all sorts of problems, but that's what you get when you make a first-person shooter on a driving game engine. At number 7, this is one that might surprise some people, but those who've played it will definitely understand what I mean. 0 Hour from Destiny 2. Yes, that's right, Destiny. The game about scanning a thing and then sitting there fighting off repetitive waves. The best parts of this secret mission are actually things that are often scorned by critics, namely time-limited missions and first-person platforming. They work here. In fact, they work incredibly well here. Yes, it's true, a lot of Destiny is just boring grind, mindless busywork, but they must have someone, locked away in a broom closet somewhere, making these amazing secret missions. Yeah, Destiny is a bit of a mess in terms of direction. This mission is unique on this list. You may notice that this is not my actual gameplay. You know why? It's the only mission on this list that you cannot go and play right now. Bungie removed it from the game. They introduced content vaulting last year to control the size of the game. Effectively, they cut content from Destiny, and now there's no way you can check whether or not this is a good mission. You're just gonna have to take my word on this one. It really encapsulates Bungie as a whole. They have some talented people, but man, if the management makes some poor decisions. At number 6, All Gillied Up from Call of Duty 4. This mission really sums up what Call of Duty campaigns aim to achieve. It has the scripted set pieces interspersed with a diversity of different gameplay challenges, not to mention the atmosphere. It is a really cold, dead rendition of Chernobyl. The mission really evokes the feeling of you being an action movie hero, pulling off some covert mission against the shady cabal of bad guys. There's so many set pieces as well, the stealth, the assassination, carrying your teammate the time section, and the holdout at the end. It truly shows off what one can do with scripted action set pieces. It's also built with a good level of moderation. It's able to make these big bombastic events while also not relinquishing too much control from the player. It is perhaps the zenith of this specific brand of scripted mission design. At number 5, we have Effect and Cause from Titanfall 2. Titanfall 2 had a surprisingly good campaign, following on from a game with no campaign. While basically every level was good, Effect and Cause easily stands out the most among fans for its original and very polished mechanic, that mechanic being time travel. You had a device on your arm which, when activated, would transfer you to the other timeline, either in the past or the future. They really utilized this mechanic well for many of the puzzles, and it gave a whole lot of depth to the platforming. It also helped with the world building. You see how this facility looked in the past and the present. You get to piece together a narrative of what happened in this place through these little glimpses. It was really interesting how they had multiple versions of the level running simultaneously, such that you could instantly time travel back and forth. It's impressive both technically and as a design achievement. They had this cool little audio gag that played if you interrupt the speaker in the lecture hall as well.
By decisively neutralizing the militia forces, we will Yes, pilot, may I help you? By decisively neutralizing the militia forces, we will in fact... Yes, pilot, may I help you?
It's just a really cool little feature. It's very clear that a lot of love and effort went into this level. Coming in at number 4 is Ziggurat Vertigo from Quake. I know you wouldn't expect a Halo zoomer to go back and appreciate these old games. Many of them feel dated with unresponsive movement and poor hit detection. Not Quake. It's hard to believe that this game came out in 1996. It still feels so fun and fluid to play. It's aged incredibly well. There's a reason every first-person shooter game is built on the Quake engine to this very day. Of course, game engines have changed a lot, but many still have the bones of the Quake engine buried deep within. Source, for example, still has a few extant lines of Quake code deep inside. It's harder to pick standouts for levels in classic shooters like Quake. Typically, it's because the levels are much shorter and there are far more levels in total. It's a case of this stretch of levels has consistently high quality, rather than this level was a really exciting standout moment. But Ziggurat Vertigo in particular is a standout moment. The low gravity with the button puzzle made this level incredibly memorable. At number 3 is the Parish from Left 4 Dead 2. It was the last of the campaigns in Left 4 Dead 2, and in my opinion, the strongest. Like Payday 2, this is more of a co-op survival game than a straight first-person shooter, but it still counts. The shooting is central to the gameplay. The Parish sees your gang of survivors witness the wreck brought upon an urban centre by the apocalypse as you try to pass through New Orleans. It has the scale and the excitement, with the bombers flying overhead blocking your path. It ends with the exciting bridge run to the finish in the helicopter, when you're getting chased by tanks. It is able to make you feel like the stakes are actually high. The world design is really interesting as well. Its semi-realistic take on the US South is a breath of fresh air. You really get an idea of the sights and sounds of the world before. Left 4 Dead's realistic environment design is very effective at immersing the player. It makes you feel like a part of the world when you're exploring actual places. It really sinks in just how much the world has gone to hell. Another beautiful thing about Left 4 Dead 2 is its random generation. You never know what monster is going to be hiding around the next corner. It's such a simple thing really. The special infected with different abilities, but the formula works so well. It is exactly what the zombie genre needed, and it's no wonder why everybody copies it. The number 2 spot is home to another Valve game, Surface Tension, from the original Half-Life. It's the chapter where you really get to see what's going on outside of Black Mesa. The military has really pulled out all stops when it comes to Black Mesa, but their efforts to cover up the incident are going about as well as celebrities' attempts to cover up their ties with Jeffrey Epstein. Chaos erupts as the aliens are in all-out war with the military. The military has helicopters and Osprey patrolling the air, bombers flying all around, tanks on the ground. The aliens are using their ships to get around. Not to mention, this is when you get the heat-seeking rocket launcher, and you get to use it against those damn helicopters and tanks. You get to call in an airstrike, you get to fight in the trenches and man the turrets. There is just so much happening in this level. It's so chaotic. It also has the reveal of the iconic Valve theme as you scale the sheer cliff face on the side of the mesa. It seems word of your covert, ethically questionable activities have gotten out, and efforts to contain them have been futile. It's not a perfect mission though. The pacing is frustrated when you enter the warehouse rigged full of mines. This part was not too fun, but it ends quickly. It still hurts the pacing though. Anyway, I think it would be remiss to let this tiny section ruin an otherwise great level. Before getting to number 1, I'd like to thank my sponsor, Soylent. I'd also like to mention some honourable would-be entries on this list. Honourable mentions, if you will. I'd like to point out the original Turok, Time Splitters, and GoldenEye 64 as games notable for their excellent levels. Well, supposedly. I haven't actually played any of them, and I don't think I could include them on the list for that reason. I'd also like to mention Hong Kong from Deus Ex, Talos 1 Exterior from Prey, Volga from Metro Exodus, and Medsci from System Shock. I didn't think these titles were the best fit because while all of the games are first-person shooters technically, the shooting isn't the primary gameplay drive. These levels focus far more on the puzzle, world building and RPG aspects. I think it's telling when they can basically all be completed without firing a single shot. So anyway, without further ado, in first place, you can probably guess what series it is just by process of elimination. You could probably also figure it out by most of what I do on my channel. The question is, what mission and what game? I chose The Covenant from Halo 3. The real question is, why did I choose this and not the Silent Cartographer? I was pondering which of the two I was going to choose. It was a very close race, but I ultimately decided on The Covenant. I feel that I need to recognize how the Halo series evolved and progressed over time. The Covenant is the best that Halo has to offer, and clearly, by its place on the list, the best first-person shooters have to offer, in my opinion. It has a broad variety of different combat encounters, the best vehicle gameplay, wide-open level design. It introduces the powerful Spartan laser. The one downside compared to the Silent Cartographer is that this level is slightly more linear in terms of design. You go from one objective to the next. It's not like you're dropped in on the island and you can go wherever you please, but just look at what you get to do. It's the first and only time you fly the Hornet in the campaign. You fight the toughest enemies the Covenant has to offer. If you time it right, you can pilot the anti-air wraith. At the end, fight not one, but 2 Scarabs. The Scarabs are a brilliant boss fight, unmatched in any other game as far as I know. Giant walking platforms with AI of their own. You have to immobilize them before you board them to destroy their core. There are a million ways to take them down. The game wants you to use the Hornet, but that's not the quickest method. You also get to momentarily side with the Flood as you launch an attack to stop the Halos from firing. The mission ends with the Arbiter thrusting his sword through the Prophet's abdomen, ending the Covenant once and for all. It's also good to mention one of the coolest Easter eggs that took weeks for players to find. Each Halo Ring hologram has a slight hum to it. Each of those hums is at a specific frequency, a certain note. In order to do the Easter egg, you jump through the Halo Rings in order with the hum corresponding with a note in the Halo theme. It's safe to say that this is some of the best that the first-person shooter genre has to offer. Anyway, thanks for watching. What did you think of this list? Post your own list in the comments. Please subscribe and join my Discord server. Thank you, and goodbye.